I'll be bombarding you with reminders and calendar invites for the next 10 months. I just want to go over some housekeeping items with you all for today's module and for future modules. If you have registered, you do not need to register again for future modules. Please make sure that every time you sign in with your first and last name. There might be someone else with the same name as you, and we want to make sure that you receive attendance credit. Having said that, we take attendance every single time. Zoom webinar documents the date and duration of your stay of the module. You do not need to email me after the module to tell me that you are in attendance. If you are having Zoom issues, I sadly cannot help. Please contact your institution's IT department. However, if you are calling in and I see phone numbers instead of names, you will not receive credit. I will message the group to try to identify them, but unless I know who is participating in the module, then I can't provide attendance credit. If you ever have any questions regarding your attendance or the modules just in general, you can always reach out to me. Lastly, students will only receive a digital badge certificate at the end of the whole cohort, so that will be in November, if they complete all 8 to 10 modules. So with that, I will turn this over to Dr. Eric Berger to kick off this year's clearance prep cohort. Eric is our research director at CCI research professor of Next-G Security, research professor of ECE, and research professor of public policy. So welcome, Eric.
Thank you so much, Kendall. And someone's already discovered it. If you have questions, feel free to put it into the Q&A button that you have in Zoom. I may get to it then. I may get to it when it's a more appropriate time. Or if you've got something that would be like personally identifying, then we probably leave it to another time. The other thing is, as Kendall mentioned, what you get is a cool digital certificate. But as she said, you have to be here at least 8 out of the 10 times. We are going to go over, what you can and some things you can't do with a clearance. Really, the bulk of the time is going to be split between how to get the clearance, the process, what you need to be mindful of. But also the other half is, what you would do with it, why you would want that. Again, it is somewhat interactive for security reasons. We're not publishing to everybody who's on this webinar, because that would be, giving the other side basically a list of people to try to turn. At the same time, I am looking forward to answering questions. This is the second year that we're running this program. Got some great questions, some real stumpers. There was a question that even our Virginia Tech Facilities Officer was like, wow, we've never run into that before. And it did generate a lot of interesting discussion. One thing that you will not get out of the program is a clearance. Once we go through what the process is, it should be pretty clear of why we are not granting clearances. So with that, let's take a look of, why would you want a clearance? And when most people think of clearance, they think of government jobs. DOD, Pentagon, clearly, most jobs, a lot of jobs there require clearances. That Palace of State, the Executive Office Building, that's where most of the White House staff work. So working in the White House. Next one's NSA. NSA and down below that, the CIA. Those are things that people think of as requiring clearances, as is the NGA. So all these are, Department of Defense, intelligence community, that's pretty straightforward. And yet there are other areas that require clearances. For example, working on military systems like the F-35, that's built not by the government, it's built by private industry. But clearly, if you're working on some of those components, they're very sensitive, and you want to keep that safe and secure. One of our partners, Khaki, has a lot of jobs that require clearances. Lockheed Martin, uh, just about any job relating to nuclear power, nuclear energy, requires some level of clearance. So it's for more than just working directly for the government. In fact, in prior cohorts, we had a number of veterans, people who maybe held a clearance in their old jobs, and looking to see how they can transfer that over to either the civilian sector or the private industry. Yeah, if you look at this, this is relatively live, clearancejobs.com, listing close to 65,000 jobs that require security clearances. Does anyone have a guess? So we can, let me see if I can quickly do this. I did not set it up beforehand, so I'll just go to the answer. The question is, what's the starting salary for a cleared technician? So this is someone with an associate's degree, probably monitoring and maintaining a Splunk instance, looking at logs, working at a company in the US. And in fact, we've got one guess in, and their guess was 56,000 a year, which if you think about it, with a 2 years degree is pretty good. The answer is actually closer to $80,000 or $90,000 a year. And it gets better for an overseas job. Almost the first $100,000 is federal tax-free. So it's actually worth even more. So having a clearance can literally be valuable. So what are the kind of the things that I've run into? And clearly these are things that the topic of the course, what does it take to be clearance ready? What do I need to do? Can I get a clearance? We'll go through what it takes to get a clearance. We're also going to be pretty open and transparent. Talk about some of the downsides of having a clearance. And again, with you and your motivation for taking this seminar, if you've got things you would like to know, feel free to put them in the chat, the Q&A, not the chat. The chat doesn't get monitored as much as Q&A. We did have a question, when I was saying $80,000, was that government, as in like government civilian, or is it a government contract? And in fact, that person has a little insight that we're going to get to. It would be a government contract. So that would be the private industry contractor rate. That's actually a really good question there. Thanks. So one thing that, again, we will go deeper into over the course of the year, and that is, where does this come from? It's not a case of a security officer says, "Oh, I like you, so you get a clearance," and someone else says, "Oh, I don't like you, you don't get a clearance." There's well-established law, executive orders, regulations, and court cases that uh, determine the process, who is eligible, what it takes. Uh, Another thing is, it used to be if you got a clearance from one agency, it pretty much didn't transfer to another agency because the different agencies basically followed their own rules. And so one thing that happened is there was kind of a reorganization of the clearance process. Is it's supposed to cut across agencies. So pretty much if you've got a top secret clearance from one agency, it would be recognized as top secret at another, although there are some exceptions there. I will take a moment to go to the Q&A. Someone asked that I mentioned this is semi-interactive, and it's truly semi-interactive, and this is an example of it. The individual typed into the Q&A, which is not like real-time live, and they put it in a couple of minutes ago, and now it's a good point to answer it. So that's what I mean by semi-interactive. It's not just me, or I hope it's not me just talking all the time, but we will be getting your questions that hopefully I can address. And again, kind of for security reasons, we're not going to be opening the microphone. And again, it's not security because we're worried about Zoom bombing, but security because if some of these clear jobs are undercover. And you never know when you may or may not get into that situation. So that's one reason. The other reason is people with clearances, and we'll especially talk about it when we get to the module on social media. You become a target. The presumption of our adversaries is if you have a security clearance, you must have access to classified information. And as a foreign government, so let's be honest here, not always our adversaries. Sometimes our partners and friends want to know what we're really thinking. And so they'll try to get that information from you. Yeah, it's another good question about the digital certificate. We'll go into that into much greater detail when we talk about social media. The question is, so we're going to get this digital certificate and we should keep that hidden. The answer really will be, it depends, and we'll keep that for the session on social media. So kind of the basis for the entire clearance process is a concept called public trust. And in fact, almost all federal jobs, so not just cleared jobs, but most federal jobs require what's called public trust. And in this case, again, it's not what a particular security officer says public trust is. We actually have an executive order, Executive Order 10450, that defines the public trust. And basically, it's two parts. One is, you'll notice it says all persons privileged to be employed. So there is no right of federal employment. It is a privilege to be employed by the federal government. And the executive order says that anyone who's going to do that in the interest of national security require those employees to be reliable, trustworthy, of good conduct and character, and of complete and unswerving loyalty to the United States. That is the basis for the entire security process. In a later session, so I promised we're going to do the social media one. We're also going to walk through almost step by step the form you need to fill out when you're applying for a security clearance, and really all of the questions on that survey, in that interview, boil down to: are you reliable? Are you trustworthy? Are you of good conduct and character? And do you have complete and unswerving loyalty to the United States? So most federal jobs require public trust, but public trust does not mean you have clearance. So let's kind of look into, are you eligible for a clearance? Well, the first question is, are you a U.S. citizen? And naturalized U.S. citizens are U.S. citizens. So if you've emigrated to the United States, you're eligible. Dual citizens may be eligible. It's a bit of a more drawn out process, but it's not an instant no. The near instant no is if you're not a U.S. citizen. We have had people taking this seminar who are not U.S. citizens. This doesn't mean don't stick it through, because if you are planning on a green card and or citizenship, it's actually much better to know what the requirements are now than to not know and do some things that might make it harder for you to have a clearance in the future. So again, back to that executive order. So you really do need to ask yourself, are you reliable, trustworthy, of good conduct and character? So what are things that are going to be looked at? Well, criminal records, illegal drug use, addictions, financial irregularities, advocating for the violent overthrow of the United States. These are all indicators that you might not be reliable, that you might not be trustworthy, that you might be conducting yourself poorly, or of a not the highest character. Now you might be now thinking, wow, 10 years ago I was arrested for a minor drug offense. Does that mean this is your last class? Don't bother going to the rest? And the answer is no. Each of these things that I've listed there, and obviously it's not a comprehensive list, they are not disqualifying on their own. Clearly, if you're right now smoking a doobie while you're listening to this, you're probably not going to get a clearance. But if there was some youthful indiscretion, and you've demonstrated your ability to stay away from those kinds of influences, then you may still be able to get a clearance. And this does tie into one of the questions. One of the questions was, well, I already have a public trust investigation, and I've passed my public trust investigation. Will it be easier for me to get a clearance? On the one hand, every application for a clearance is evaluated on the individual's own facts and circumstances and merits at that time. Now, having filled in the SF-84 for the public trust investigation, actually, the way it helps you get a clearance is when you fill out the SF-86, which is the application for security clearance. you've answered a quarter of the questions already. And if you remember filling out your SF-84, you probably had to think of where have I lived, who are my friends. That's all the same information. They just ask a lot more information. Another question, if you get a clearance, can you also work on jobs where you don't need a clearance? I don't need a clearance here, and I have one. There's your answer. Now, and we will talk about this on the limits of having a clearance and why you might not want one. I was approached to be on the board of a Chinese telecommunications carrier. I cannot do that and hold my clearance. Now, notice that though, it's not, I can't do it. I can't do it and hold my clearance. I also might have restrictions on where you can travel, but even without, past the time when you give up your clearance, but no, it doesn't change, who you can work for, what you can do, volunteer work. If you have multiple jobs, there are lots of consultants, contractors who have clearances and work for multiple kinds of things. So that's all allowed. Another question is, hey, marijuana is legal. Is that still a problem? That is worthy of an entire session. That's coming in the next few months. We're going to talk deeply about marijuana and drug use. And then here's a good one. And that is, what if you're receiving government assistance? Absolutely not an issue with respect to the clearance. Now, if you're on assistance because you're an alcoholic and you can't keep a job, it's not the fact that you're on assistance or welfare or WIC or Medicaid. It's that you're an alcoholic and you can't keep a job. Does it mean you're more likely to get looked at? Maybe, but we're going to talk about how to address issues like that. And finally, we've got a question. What if your country of birth is outside the United States? Well, you're a U.S. citizen, you're good. What if you go travel back to that country? Probably good. Again, facts and circumstance. If your father is the president of Russia, Iran, North Korea, and you go back home, it might be really tough to get a clearance. If you're visiting family, and they're not, known terrorists, known supporters of terrorism, high-level ranking government officials supporting terrorism, those are kind of like obvious why you wouldn't be likely to get a clearance. But if those don't apply to you, then yeah, you're still possibly eligible for a clearance. I am actually going to get back to these two other questions. Oh, but I will answer this one that just popped in, and this is the semi-interactive. So just as I addressed like Medicaid and WIC and things like that, what about your credit score? And the answer is your credit score will be pulled as a part of this process. Not only will it be pulled, but you give the United States the ability to continuously monitor your credit. And the reason for this is there have been so many cases in the past. We'll talk about this again later in the program, where someone goes into debt and a foreign government basically says, we'll get you out of debt. You just do these favors for us. And so That is one of the factors that's closely watched is effectively what's your credit score. Now, again, if it's, and especially as here we are in university and colleges, you have student loan debt and you're having trouble paying it, it's probably going to be a very different thing than you run up a lot of credit card debt gambling. So again, it's always facts and circumstance around your particular situation. So let's talk about, what's kind of the point of having this whole security process. And that is, why do we have secrets? And this is worth reading out loud. The national defense has required that certain information be maintained in confidence in order to protect our citizens, our democratic institutions, our homeland security, and our interactions with foreign nations. I would also note that there are a whole bunch of things that are not listed there, like it's not to protect politicians or to protect government workers from malfeasance, from being, like from hiding fraud. That's not what it's for. And that is strictly looked at. But there are things, and the movie Oppenheimer came out this past year. Was not cool that eventually How to Build an Atomic Bomb got leaked. And you can imagine it could have been devastating had that gone out earlier to other countries. We do have classification levels. If you're familiar with soccer, football, there are fouls and misconduct. There's something that's kind of bad, something that's bad, and something that's really bad. And so the three classification levels are confidential, which is, it's reasonable to expect that if the secret got out, it could cause damage to national security. Something that's classified as secret. So this is a thing where unauthorized disclosure would be expected to cause serious damage. And top secret is exceptionally grave damage to national security. So these are the three classification levels: confidential, secret, and top secret. Now, you may hear about other levels of classification. In fact, you might, look online and a job might be listed where it'll say TS SCI. So top secret, disclosing it could cause exceptionally grave damage. SCI, sensitive compartmented information. This is where it's so secret. We want to make sure that, because you always have to have a need to know, but for SCI, you really, really, really have to have a specific need to know. And later we're going to talk a bit deeper on what SCI and special access programs mean. There's also something called CUI, or Controlled and Classified Information, roughly known also as for official use only. So it's not classified information, but something that's not supposed to be disclosed. So for example, just as your college or university collected your social security number and your right to the education, that's not classified information, but it's also illegal to disclose it because it's your personally identifiable information. That's kind of where CUI goes. The other, again, going back to the movie Oppenheimer, you might remember he was waiting on his Q clearance. And basically, the DOE, Department of Energy, has what they call access authorizations. The Q is roughly top secret, and the L is roughly secret. So there are some principles. One is the level of access determines the depth of investigation. So everyone pretty much working for the federal government gets a public trust thing. You also don't have access to classified information with that public trust. But you're working on a project that might need occasional access to information that, is likely to cause serious damage. Well, that would be a secret. And so, we'll, look closer at you, how likely are you going to be turned, whatever. If you need access to top secret information where there could be exceptional harm to the United States for that information getting out, then, you can expect a very deep investigation. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to address some of the Q&A that we got here. One was, how do you get started to receive a public trust investigation? Is that like a good first step? And the answer is actually kind of similar to the answer for how do I get a clearance? You get a public trust clearance, get a job that requires public trust, so typically a federal job. How do you get a security clearance? You have to have basically a job offer for a job that requires a clearance. You can't just ask for one. You literally need one. One question is, we talked about confidential, secret, and top secret. And so, well, hey, I've got a secret and I want to go to a job with a top secret. Can I move up? Can we call it, upgrading? And the answer is absolutely yes. Especially on the civilian side, it's not unusual to be working at like the secret level, and then something happens, you need access, you can, start the process for top secret. It's actually less often that you move downwards, which actually will tie into another question. And that is, we don't typically, step back from a top secret because the investigation is done. There's the continuous monitoring, and in theory, there should be like more invasive and continuous monitoring for top secret, but once it's on, it's kind of on. So you typically don't lose the top secret for about 2 years. And then if your job is really just secret, then yeah, you might get bumped down. But it's not, that's not guaranteed either way. But that also ties into the next one. So just as I said, how do you get public trust, get a federal job? How do you get security clearance, get a job that requires it? And so someone asked, is it true that paying for a clearance can be expensive? And the answer is it's very expensive. The last I looked, secret clearance was $12,000, top secret was $25,000. And so is it expensive? Yes, it's expensive. Don't quote me on those numbers. They may have changed this year, but that was the last time I was involved on the other side of a clearance. So then the question is it best to have a sponsor to pay for it? And the answer is you cannot pay for it. In fact, your sponsor cannot pay for it if it's, like a contractor. Only the US government can pay for it. We're going to go kind of deep into why that's the case later. But again, it comes back to that you don't really apply for a clearance. You apply for a job that requires a clearance, and that's how you get the clearance. Actually, I'm going to hold on because this next slide actually could possibly address some things. So why might you not want a clearance? So one thing is it can be long. For some people, it can be, year or years. And that is also one of the reasons why we have this program. Both that if you realize, yeah, there's no way I'm going to get a clearance, you don't, sit in a job, because basically you sit in a job not allowed to work on the thing you really want to work for, which would be the thing that has a clearance. And sometimes those jobs are pretty boring. Sometimes they're cool, but sometimes they're pretty boring. It's also can be quite invasive. And in the next class, we're going to talk about, the invasiveness. And another reason is, why you might not want a clearance is you're pretty confident you're not going to get it. You're currently using illegal drugs. You are currently involved in criminal activity. These are the kinds of things that you might just decide, it's not worth it. And the other part is it's continuous evaluation. So it's not just the case of, I can keep off the booze for a couple of months while I get the clearance, but then I'll go back on. It doesn't work that way. You agree to be subjected to continuous evaluation. And so this gets into some of the questions, and we actually will get into this a bit more, in fact, in the next session. But one of the questions was, what if you're going through therapy? And what if you're on antidepressant medication? So it's facts and circumstances. And an interesting dynamic, the fact that let me take it back. The fact that you've done therapy can be seen as a positive effect. You have an issue, you take care of it. That's seen positively. If it's court-ordered therapy, then again, it's not disqualifying, but it'll determine on the facts and circumstances. And the same for like antidepressive medication. I am aware of a case that's being adjudicated literally right now. And the individual has had to get not only a statement from their therapist, but they had to get evaluated by an independent therapist about, how reliable this individual would be. And actually, at that point, this person was lucky. They're working for a contractor, and the contractor's paying for those additional tests and all that. But that could easily have been paid for out of that individual's pocket. The government's not going to pay for that. Basically, if the government says, and it was this case, and we'll talk about this again deeper next time, where the government basically said no. The government denied the clearance, and they're appealing it, and they're in the process of that. Another one which we actually, it's simpler, we had similar to this in the last cohort. What if your birth family has issues? Facts and circumstances about you, it should not make any difference. The reality is, you do list your family members on the SF-86, and if they have criminal records or whatever, you would expect to get scrutinized more. And like if you're the first in your family to not be arrested and first in your family to go to college and graduate, probably get a clearance. If you've been running the money for your parents who are running a gambling operation, you might not get the clearance. Let's see. Another question is, are there jobs outside of the country that need a government clearance? Well, that salary I quoted there was for if you worked outside of the country. So yes, there are lots of jobs that require clearance that are performed outside the country. So clearly you can retain that clearance, although typically you can retain that clearance while you're working in that country really easy if that job requires the clearance. It's facts and circumstances. If you like have a clearance with one like a defense contractor, and like let's say you work for Lockheed Martin here in the US and you go work for BAE in London, you may or may not. It really depends on the facts and circumstances there. One person said, "Hey, I was joining the armed forces, and then something happened. I got a medical disqualification. Is there a way to find out if I had a clearance?" You will know if you have a clearance. Let's just put it that way. So you may have been investigated, and depending on how long ago it was, and whether you're going like to the same department or agency, you may or may not be ahead on the process, but that really is a may or may not. Likewise, someone asked, as an undergraduate or, maybe even as a graduate student, I did a semester abroad or I did an internship while, abroad. Not a problem. Well, not a problem unless you're like working for the Ministry of Defense in Iran. That probably would end up being disqualifying. But in fact, there are jobs like the Foreign Service and the intelligence community. That would be seen as a huge positive that you lived and worked in a foreign country. I've got students who done their semester abroad and became analysts for that region. So, that's certainly not disqualifying in itself. So something that, you are touching upon the catch-22 of the clearance world. And the question was, so why do I see a lot of job postings saying clearance required? Mainly because the company doesn't want to take a chance that you might not get a clearance. And likewise, the company doesn't want to carry you while you're in the process of getting a clearance. So then the next logical question is, how do I get a clearance? Well, you get a job that requires a clearance, but to get a job, I need a clearance. That's the catch-22. And hopefully this class will make you better prepared. And the hope is, even where the posting might say clearance required, if you happen to know someone at that company or that department or agency, if it's a federal job, if you say, hey, I know what it takes. I've, learned everything. I can tell you right now, this, and this. I'm highly likely to be cleared. Hopefully that gives you a better chance of getting that first position. It really is getting into the system much easier once you've had a clearance. Let's see. Will a clearance restrict you from traveling? The answer is most likely. When you have a clearance, you will have to tell the issuing agency before you go travel. You need basically approval to travel. Clearly right now, there are some places that you just can't go, but I wouldn't say you can't go. So what came immediately to my mind is Gaza. And again, that's more of a safety thing than a national security thing. But what if you work for the CIA? It gets sent to Gaza. So there's no blanket, this country is out of bounds, this country is just fine. Because, for example, Five Eyes, you're going to go travel to Australia, uh, you know, not telling the government that you're meeting at the Chinese embassy would probably be problematic. Social media posts, we are going to get to whole session getting on that. Um, let's see. What could you do to lose your security clearance? And typically it's the things that would make it for you to not get a clearance. If you send money to Hamas, you're going to lose your clearance. If you support the violent overthrow of the United States, you're likely to lose your clearance. If you either all of a sudden go into debt, deep debt, or worse, you're in debt and you all of a sudden come into a bunch of money, you're going to get investigated. If it really was your great aunt who died and left you a lot of money, okay, fine, that happens. If it's mystery money that ends up being traced to the People's Liberation Army, you're going to be in a world of hurt. The so someone's asked about how long is a clearance good for? I'll get back to that in a later session. We kind of go over the different ones. So here's a good question. Disloyalty to the United States. Again, you are asked to fill in your immediate nuclear family. So like cousins and stuff, they're not going to require you to disclose. But let's say, your brother is a member of a terrorist organization. Your sister, your mother is a member of an organization that wants to overthrow the United States. Does that mean you can't get a clearance? And the answer is not necessarily. It certainly does not automatically disqualify you. Even if it's Iran, China, Russia, North Korea, who are right now the big four. But it does depend on what your sensibilities are. So, for example, if your brother's a terrorist and you're estranged from your brother, facts and circumstance. Will you get a closer look? Probably. Will it be immediately disqualifying? No. If your brother's a terrorist and you're sharing an apartment, probably no. So those are things, and again, this is in the why I might not want the clearance, because what you fill in on the SF-86 pretty much can't be used to prosecute you. And we're going to talk a lot about that, a lot about error on the side of disclosing. However, if the FBI, and especially if you're going for a top secret clearance, when the FBI comes to your house to interview you and your neighbors, and they see that your brother is a terrorist, that might be a problem for your brother, because that's the FBI's job, is to find terrorists and bring them to justice. Another one I really can't, I don't know the answer to. If your parents came to the US illegally, can you get a clearance? Well, the first question is, are you a US citizen? Because, like if you're here under DACA, you're not a US citizen. And so you're going to run into that issue. But if you are a US citizen, then that would be a facts and circumstance thing. In fact, one thing I don't mention here, for some of these wacky corner cases, it may be worth spending a couple $100 and talking to a lawyer. There are lawyers who specialize in this. Yeah, okay. So two things that are related. Someone asked, do different agencies have different disqualifying rules? And another one asked that, would different departments have different security criteria? The answer is no and yes. So the no is, as I talked about, let me just pull this back here. Uh, uniform rules, right? The different agencies cannot be arbitrary in what rules they have. However, different agencies, can have different requirements. So for example, even though we have all of these principles, and this ties into another question, will you have to take what's called a polygraph, or colloquially, a lie detector test? And the answer is depends on the agency. There's one agency in particular, two agencies I can think of that, you're going to apply to those agencies, you're going to get a lie detector test. Other agencies don't care. They're not going to do it. It's not a part of the top secret baseline. But these two agencies and probably others, it's still part of their culture. And in fact, sometimes they don't recognize, like, you go between those agencies, you might have to do it again. Another one that you has kind of a different answer, and that is, do different agencies have different disqualifying rules? We're going to talk about this in the drug use module. There are some agencies that are basically never ever. If you use drugs, don't bother applying. There are other agencies, it's like, you've been clean for 6 months, good enough for us. There are others, I don't know if it's this way today, but I remember in the 1980s talking to people at the nuclear Navy. And they were almost, we'd prefer to have someone who smoked marijuana once and didn't like it than someone who's never tried marijuana, because they were worried that somebody might try it and like it. So different agencies do tend to have different subtleties of the rules, but the broad outline is all the same. One question is, what if on social media I'm okay, but my friends are, kind of doing questionable activities? We are going to hit it in the social media one, but I will touch it now. You're going to get looked at. If all of your friends are confirmed terrorists, that might be a problem for you. Or confirmed drug dealers, or pick a category that would normally be disqualifying. But again, that doesn't mean that you are. And so, it depends on your facts and circumstance. But also remember, one of the characteristics are of good character. And one of the things considered a good character are, who are the friends that you keep. Another good question is, hey, I've got a secret clearance. I've got a new job that requires top secret, and you're denied top secret. In theory, you could keep your secret clearance because we are supposed to look deeper for top secret. Good question. Probably have our FSO on to see what the experience is with that. So unfortunately, I can't give a good answer for that one. The dual citizenship one, we did address. That is, you can have a top secret clearance with dual citizenship, but it can be more complicated, and it's not a guarantee. Uh, so, um, so hold on here a second. Just, do that. I did just, someone asked a really good question, and I'd actually, if they're okay with it, I'd like to read the question verbatim, because it is actually a really good question. So while that person, and I don't know if you can answer that, or maybe just put it back into the Q&A. Yeah, this is the question for you. Do you still want to apply? I'm hoping that most of you would still want to apply. And yes, so this person asked, and again, I'll do it verbatim. I'm interested in knowing your personal opinion about whether, and I'll change it to me, whether I believe that the whole process of people being paranoid or scared of potential actions that could prevent them from getting a clearance is blown out of proportion. Obviously, it is a serious process and important to the security of our country, but do I believe people who are qualified for a clearance get too nervous about the process? And the answer is yes. I think people, a lot of people think, oh, this clearance is just beyond me. It's just not possible for me to get this clearance. I got to be in a class once and lied about it. Or, yeah, I tried marijuana 10 years ago and didn't like it. So that is, I would say hang in there and see, and I'm going to guess that this person is pretty confident in their position. But if you're sitting there thinking, wow, I heard a lot of things that I'm not quite sure whether I want to do it, I kind of stick around and get more depth. Again, like we are going to definitely talk about drug use and how that's not necessarily instantly disqualifying, but also not as straightforward as you might hope it would be. So thank you. Those were all good questions there. So what's coming in over the course of the year? So we've talked about the clearance process, why you'd want one, why you might not want to go through the process. Next month, we are going to go through the SF-86, the standard form for applying for a security clearance, and it'll go over all those things that they're going to be invasively asking about. One thing to note, all of our sessions are at 1 o'clock except for the one in March. That one is at noon. So please tune in at noon, not 1 o'clock. We're going to talk in a bit of depth of the clearance rules and regulations, and that's where we can talk a bit more about things like dual citizenship and whatnot. Definitely, like I said, May is when we're going to talk about drug use, especially the subtitle is, but it's legal in my state. We're going to talk about where this all comes from and how the laws and how they're written and the regulations, how those translate into behaviors they're looking for. And then whole session on social media. And by the way, social media is a lot more than Facebook and LinkedIn. I'm going to go into that in depth. Finally, in terms of why you might want a clearance, we're going to have some speakers from industry and the federal government, basically talking about the cool stuff you can do if you only took a job with them. So with that, I will hand it back to Kendall to close us out. Thank you.
Thank you, Eric. And before a lot of you guys drop off, just a reminder that if you do plan to attend our future modules, please sign in with your first and last name. I have 4 people here. There's someone that has a starting name of M9F. If you want credit today, please email me so I can figure out what your first and last name is. Also, somebody named Mercy, Dave, and Kira. Please email me and let me know your first and last name so you can get credit, or you will not get credit. Well, with having said that, you all see the schedule here. You will hear from me probably maybe 2 or 3 reminders in the next month. But if That is all. We will see you all on March 13th at noon.
Thank you all.